So here's a riddle for you.
Okay.
What's the most successful songwriting partnership of all time?
Let me think about that for a minute. Okay, I'd have to say it's Lennon and McCartney.
I believe you are correct, and if you had been incorrect, you would have been fired as the co-host of Beatles Rewind.
Oh, I would have packed my bags immediately. But honestly, looking at the sheer impact of those two, it's hard to imagine any other answer.
It really is. And to really get why, we have to go back to the very beginning. The story of how this whole thing started is, well, it's almost too cinematic to be real.
It feels like a screenwriter came up with it.
It does. So picture this. July 6th, 1957. We're in Woolton, a suburb of Liverpool, at the St. Peter's Church fete.
A classic British summer scene. You can almost smell it. Cut grass, maybe some stale beer.
Exactly. And on this makeshift stage, which was really just the back of a truck, there's a skiffle group playing, the Quarrymen.
Led by a 16-year-old John Lennon.
And he's playing a cover of Come Go With Me. But here's the thing. He doesn't really know the chords. He's playing the guitar like it's a banjo.
And he's making up the lyrics. Just inventing them as he goes along because he can't remember the real ones. But he had this swagger, this raw charisma you couldn't look away from.
And watching him with this laser focus is a 15-year-old Paul McCartney.
That's the moment. The spark.
It is. Paul eventually gets backstage or, into the church hall where they were, and he picks up a guitar.
And plays Eddie Cochran's 20 Flight Rock.
Perfectly. He knows all the chords, and he knows all the words.
Which, for John, that was a total revelation. He was used to being the leader, the alpha, and suddenly, here's this kid who is technically better than him.
It was a huge ego check for him. He actually debated for a while whether to invite Paul to join. He had to ask himself, do I make the band better, or do I stay the king?
Thankfully for all of us, he chose the music.
He did, and that one decision, the statistics that spun out from that afternoon are just mind-numbing. The Beatles went on to sell over 600 million records worldwide.
And just on the songwriting front, between 1962 and 1970, 8 years?
Just 8 years.
They're credited on roughly 180 songs.
That's absurd. It's like a new song every couple of weeks while they're touring and making movies.
But, the numbers only tell you so much. What makes this partnership so special wasn't just the quantity, it was the alchemy, the actual mechanics of how they wrote.
Right. In those early days, the method was so intimate. John described it as working eyeball to eyeball.
I love that phrase. And it was literal. They'd skip school, go to Paul's house, and sit in the front parlor, knee to knee with two acoustic guitars.
Spraying right into each other's faces.
And that's a huge musical advantage. You breathe together. You phrase together. It's why those early harmonies on Say She Loves You are just impossibly tight.
They weren't just overdubbing them later.
No, they were writing the harmony at the same time as the melody. They were learning to anticipate each other's thoughts.
There's that great story John told about writing I Want to Hold Your Hand. This was a little later, when the pressure was on to break America.
They were at Jane Asher's house.
Down in the basement, yeah. In this tiny room. And they're both sitting at one piano at the same time.
That's hard to even picture.
And John said he was playing the lower end, the bass notes, and Paul was on the high end. And Paul hits this one chord.
A B minor.
And John just shouts, "That's it! Do that again!" It was that instant. It was true collaboration where the lines just blurred completely.
And that's key. Paul once said they never had a single unsuccessful writing session in those early years. If they sat down to write, they walked out with a song.
It sounds like an exaggeration, but
looking at the catalog, maybe it's not.
And because of that intense connection, they made that handshake deal long before they were huge.
The deal that everything they wrote, whether together or on their own, would be credited to Lennon-McCartney.
Which is a massive commitment to the team over the individual, especially for two guys with egos that big.
It is. And it caused some friction later, of course. Imagine writing Yesterday, all by yourself, and still having to share the credit.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, it was this beautiful statement. We are a unit. We are a brand.
Now, if we look at music history, there are plenty of great songwriting duos. But these two were different. Think about the Gershwins or Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Or Leiber and Stoller, who wrote all those huge early rock hits like Hound Dog.
Exactly. In all those other partnerships, you had a clear division of labor. One person does the music, the other does the lyrics.
Right. It was sequential. Hammerstein would write the words, hand the page to Rodgers, and then Rodgers would write the music. Very professional, very efficient.
But John and Paul,
No lanes. They were both complete songwriters. Both wrote music, both wrote lyrics. And that is a huge distinction.
because it changes the power dynamic, doesn't it?
Completely. It meant they could challenge every single aspect of a song. John could say, I think that chord should change. And Paul could look at John's lyrics and say, that line is cheesy, fix it.
So the writing session instantly becomes an editing session.
Exactly. Cynthia Lennon had a great observation about this. She said John needed Paul's persistence and his attention to detail. Paul was the one who would say, we aren't leaving until this bridge is finished.
And what did Paul need from John?
He needed John's anarchic, lateral thinking. Paul would write something very pretty, and John would come in and roughen it up, make it weird, make it art.
It was the perfect cover for each other's weaknesses. And you could see it in their personalities, too. I mean, they were chalk and cheese.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul was the organized one. He had a notebook, neat handwriting. He was the diplomat charming the press.
And John was.
Total chaos. Scribbling on scraps of paper, backs of envelopes. He was confrontational, provocative. He wanted to capture the lightning in a bottle and move on.
In most bands, that would just destroy them.
For them, it created this electricity, this tension. And as they moved into the mid-60s, the process evolved a little.
They weren't always eyeball to eyeball anymore.
No, they started writing more on their own and bringing the songs to each other for what I call the polish, the finishing touches.
And this is where we get some of the best examples of their counterpoint.
For sure. Take In My Life. That feels like a quintessential John song, right? It's so personal, so nostalgic.
But the melody.
Paul claims he wrote the melody. He brought that musical structure to John's very raw, personal words. Without Paul, it might have just been a three-chord strummer.
And on the flip side, you have a song like Eleanor Rigby.
Which everyone thinks of as Paul's song. A perfect little character study.
But John had a huge hand in that. He helped shape the narrative. They were constantly improving each other's work.
My favorite example has to be Getting Better from the Sgt. Pepper album.
Oh, that's the classic. It's their two worldviews in one song.
It is. You have Paul singing this incredibly optimistic chorus. It's getting better all the time. It's so sunny and hopeful.
And then what does John add in the background?
It can't get no worse.
It grounds the whole thing. It keeps it from just floating away into pop fluff.
It's that dose of Lennon realism or cynicism.
And then you get the ultimate mashup, which is A Day in the Life.
A masterpiece. And it's really two different songs completely glued together. John had the opening verses, the I read the news today, oh boy part.
Surreal, dreamy, a bit dark.
But he was stuck. He had no middle section.
Enter Paul.
Enter Paul, this is a little fragment he had. Woke up, fell out of bed. It was just a little piano piece about his morning commute. Mundane. Totally different.
It's surrealism meets the daily grind.
And that amazing orchestral swell in the middle, that was their bridge between two completely different musical worlds. Neither of them could have written that song alone.
Now, we've talked about them as collaborators, but we have to touch on the competition. Because these guys were competitive.
Oh, fiercely. Like elite athletes training together.
It wasn't a destructive thing, at least not at first. It was more like, if you run a 4-minute mile, I have to run it in 3:59.
Paul said that having John in the room just kept him from being lazy. He couldn't settle for an easy rhyme because he knew John would call him on it. He'd just say, that's rubbish, Paul.
And you see this ping-pong effect through their whole career. John writes Strawberry Fields Forever, this incredible psychedelic piece about his childhood.
So what does Paul do? He can't let that stand. He has to respond.
With Penny Lane.
Tit for tat. But notice the difference. John's memory is murky and abstract. Paul's is crisp and bright. Same topic, totally different perspective.
Paul writes Yesterday, which becomes the most covered song ever.
And John feels the pressure. He has to dig deep and comes back with In My Life. They were constantly trying to top each other.
George Martin, their producer, said the secret sauce was their willingness to take criticism from each other.
That's so rare.
Most artists get so defensive.
But they trusted each other enough to be ruthless.
Yeah.
They could say, that melody is boring, and the other one wouldn't storm out. They'd just say, okay, let's fix it.
That lack of ego, just between the two of them, was the key.
For a while, anyway.
Right. Because we know the story doesn't end there. By the late 60s, things started to fracture.
It was a perfect storm, really. Brian Epstein, their manager, died. They lost their rudder. They were trying to manage themselves, which was a disaster.
And the one-upmanship started to get a little less friendly.
It got personal. And then the partners arrived. John breaks protocol, brings Yoko Ono into the studio, not just in the control room, but sitting on an amp.
which drove Paul crazy.
So what did Paul do? He brings Linda Eastman in. It's that mirroring again.
And when Paul marries Linda,
John and Yoko get married 8 days later. There was this edge to it now.
by the time they got to Abbey Road, they were barely functioning as a team. But even then,
the magic flickered. That medley on side 2 is just a collection of their unfinished song scraps woven together. It shows what they could still do when they put the hostility aside.
But the split was coming. John wanted to be experimental, political. Paul wanted to entertain.
And after 1970, we got to see the great experiment. What happens when you split the atom?
The ultimate what if.
And Paul forms Wings. It has massive commercial success. Band on the run, Live and Let It Die. He owned the 70s charts.
Proved he was the master of melody.
But the critics, they missed the vinegar. Without John to add that edge, some of it was called, lightweight.
And
John went the other way. He gave us this raw confessional work. Imagine. Jealous guy. So powerful. But without Paul's musical discipline, sometimes it felt a little underproduced.
It's the paradox, isn't it? They needed to break free to grow, but the partnership was where the magic was.
It makes you wonder. You listen to a masterpiece like Paul's, Maybe I'm Amazed, and you can't help but think, what would John have added?
A cynical line in the bridge, maybe.
Or you listen to Imagine. So simple and beautiful. What would Paul have done with the bass line on that? Or a string arrangement?
It's a fascinating thought experiment. They proved they could succeed apart, no question.
Absolutely. But they never quite recaptured that same consistent, jagged brilliance they had when they were pushing against each other.
So when we look at this whole arc, what are the big lessons here? What do we learn from Lennon and McCartney?
I think there are 3 things. First, that healthy competition drives excellence. You need someone to push you.
Stops you from coasting.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Second, complementary strengths are better than identical skills. The fact that they were so different was their greatest asset.
And the third?
Trust. You have to trust someone to be able to take that kind of honest, brutal feedback. They had that for a long time.
The question we always ask is, were they better together or apart? But maybe that's the wrong question.
What's the right one?
Maybe it's, would they have even become who they were without each other?
I think that's it. Would Paul have been so adventurous without John pushing him? Would John have learned the discipline to finish his masterpieces without Paul?
The answer is almost certainly no.
I agree. They sharpened each other. And in doing that, they created this body of work that doesn't just belong to John or Paul. It belongs to the world.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Whenever you feel like knowing more about the Beatles, visit us at BeatlesRewind.com. It's the Beatles, all day, every day, 8 days a week. Cass will do it again tomorrow.
Right. You bet, Steve. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Goodbye, everyone.
Until next time, when you listen.
Your mind conducts its own symphony.